Get rolling. All right, folks, we're looking at Unit 1 content right now. We have a bunch of different things that we're trying to get through. And what you'll notice here, and this is kind of a very typical, I'll say, anatomy of my, like a typical unit of instruction now that we're in Unit 1. And that is always at the top of the unit, you'll notice that I have a listing of the topics that we're covering in this unit. Like, what's this unit about? You know? And for the most part, it's about Chapter 1, but there's some other auxiliary topics that you'll see. So we did the syllabus thing in introductions, so that's kind of already out of the way. We talked a little bit about some of the essential computer concepts, a little bit about hardware and software, what stuff you need to succeed. And you see all the Chapter 1 topics there, but then at the bottom you see this file management skills. And this is always one that becomes really essential when you become both a pro in the field, but really as you start to study this stuff, because what happens is you start to generate so much content yourself, and you're given content and you're creating files, and how do you find it, right? So, I mean, this is really kind of a standard computing conundrum, and it doesn't help that our modern operating systems, the Windows OS, the Mac OS, if you use other variants, that those also have certain aspects that are really kind of, I'm trying to say this politely, have dumbed down file management for regular people. And why? Okay, so like if I'm on my Mac, right, and it's more, this is probably first happened on a Mac, and I don't know where a file is, I bring up my Spotlight search, and I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's just, you press Command space and you just start typing like my paper, and then it just pops up and you press on it and it's there, right? I don't even care where it was stored, right? Windows is kind of the same way. Like you create a file, you save it, you download it, you do whatever, and it just kind of goes somewhere in my documents folder or my downloads folder, and I kind of forget about it. And then when I need it again, I just go search for it. That's fine for a regular consumer. It is not fine for IT professionals. IT professionals, if you want to make like a correlation here, like if you were driving a car, you had the fob or the key, and you can drive it. You really kind of don't. You put gas in it. You don't care what's happening under the hood, as long as it keeps working. It's under warranty. It messes up, I take it to the dealer. They fix it, and charge me an arm and a leg, and it keeps running, right? But we're going to be the kind of person that lifts the hood and goes, "Oh, the belt's broken or the hose is disconnected. I'm going to replace it." And we need a higher level of technical knowledge. It starts with file management. So that's like one of the first lessons we have, because it's critical as you're starting out to know how to put your files in places. And I am demonstrating here on a Windows machine, but all these same principles really apply to the Mac OS and a Linux OS if that's your OS of choice. Now you notice here, I am running a dark theme on my computer, so all my windows are dark. And if that might not work for you, because the default in Windows is for it to be white and bright, but I'm like one of those like low light computing in the dark people, and that's more pleasing to my eyes, generally speaking. But I clicked on the File Explorer, which usually is a standard icon in the Windows taskbar at the bottom. And if it's not, you can just simply go to your Start menu and just start typing File Explorer, and there it is. Right? And this is our file management tool on Windows. If you are on the Mac OS, you go to the Finder. That's what they call it on the Mac OS. Roughly the same equivalent. Interfaces look a little bit different. I like to point out a bunch of different features, but there's some really critical ones for us, especially as web developers. You discover them really quick. And the reason we do this file management thing is to kind of circumvent that problem. The problem, namely, is file extensions and knowing where your stuff is stored, and then naming conventions for the files, because what works on a consumer OS is different than what works on a server OS, right? So these are really important distinctions. So the first thing I'll do is just kind of point out that usually, and I might be wrong on this, because time has passed, and my machine's not in its original configuration. Obviously, there's been a couple of years of use on it. But in the file window, did you guys notice I clicked this little expander icon here. It's like a little chevron shaped icon on the far right. That normally, I think when you open the File Explorer, you're not seeing the ribbon bar until you click on a menu item. I'm a real big fan of leaving it open all the time because I think it's useful, frankly. And most of the stuff that we're going to do in a file window, you can access from that ribbon bar. That's what Microsoft calls it, is a ribbon bar. And I like it when it's just turned on and left on, right? As an IT pro, I recommend that you do the same thing. You can run your computer any way you want. There's the other aspect is, okay, now that we have the tool, where do you put your files? Windows kind of coerces its users to do a couple of different things. The first thing that it coerces is it creates a documents folder that it assumes you're going to use to store all your stuff, right? So you guys are kind of getting a little sneak peek at some of my files here. And for the most part, that's fine, right? And if you want to use that for your file storage, do it. You'll notice I went to the trouble, and I do this every semester, is I created a gateway folder, and then I go into my gateway folder, and then I start making folders for all of my classes. And then I go into my Web 1 folder, for example, and then I start making folders for all of the units of instruction, or whatever logical subdivision makes sense to you. Now, what I want to see you guys do for this file management assignment in Unit 1 is to create a folder structure that's preemptive to the work you're going to do. So you can kind of look ahead and go, hey, look, there's Unit 1, Unit 2. In fact, we have 9 units of instruction, hint, hint, right? So you can create maybe a gateway folder if that's how you want to do it. It's your choice, really. Remember, please keep that in mind. Some people will create a semester folder like fall semester or spring semester. Other people will name it by course and then by unit folder, and whatever structure makes sense to you, but know how to find it, right? And so while it's true that we can kind of use this quick access thing here, so all the most recent files I've done are listed here, when I know where my files are located, I can go directly to them. Okay. All right, so that's the one aspect. Now, if I wanted to create a folder, how do I do that? So I'm in my documents folder. I go to the home tab and click new folder. You can also, by the way, you can right click on an empty space inside the right side of the view here, hover over new, and then select folder. And that'll be the technique I use right now, right? And then let's say I want to make one for Gateway. I already have one of those, so I'm just going to create like GTC, for example, knowing that all my work's going to go in there. And then, all right, well, I have web programming, so I'll come up here, make another new folder inside there, call it web programming, right? Then I will either double click or press enter to go into it. And then I'll create another new folder for each unit of instruction. For Unit 1, probably one of the only assignments, well, you have a couple of assignments, so you do need a Unit 1 folder. Unit 1, right? Now, normally, I'm just putting it out there, I would type unit space 1. Great, right? That'll work fine. However, here's the big however. When I start uploading my work to the web server, web servers don't always like spaces in the file names. So what I'm going to implore you as a web developer, and there are kind of these conventions that we use, one of them is name all your folders and files all lowercase when you do standard HTML. Why? Because the web servers like it better and always work. And if you follow a convention, you always know how it's named. On your machine, it's not going to matter much if you put spaces in there or make it upper or lowercase or put special characters in. Windows will still find it. I put it on the server, one character is off, like the U in unit is capital instead of lowercase, it's not going to work, right? So the politeness of our consumer operating systems of Windows and Mac OS in particular, which dumb that down, does not exist on the server. The server needs precision and code needs precision. There's no horseshoes, hand grenades in coding. It's got to be exact. If it's not exact, it doesn't work. Case sensitive, and if you follow, so my point is if you follow a convention like this, that will help you when you upload your work to the server. Right? It's not that our server doesn't work with spaces, but then every time you have a space in a file or folder name, you then are replacing it with a %20. That's not really friendly, right? When you write code. Right? So that's kind of the thinking here. Now, once you've gone to the trouble of creating your folder structure here, and I'm gonna kind of backtrack a little bit because I probably have like maybe here, one of these probably has a few more folders. Okay, so something like this. All you have to do for this file management assignment is create your folder structure and then take a screenshot of it. Put that into a Word document and submit it to me. So I'm going to show you how to do all of that, right? So first step, screenshotting. In Windows, there are actually two screenshot tools built in now, the old version of the snipping tool and the new version called Snip and Sketch. I'll show you both of them just so you know. I still tend to use the older one more often. That's just because I'm used to it, right? So you notice I went to the start menu. I started typing. I didn't go scrolling, right? I just started typing snip, S-N-I. It pulled up snipping tool. It's highlighted right now. I'm pressing enter. Notice right when I launch this, it also puts up a little thing. Try Snip and Sketch. So I'll click that one too, and I'll just open it and leave it off to the side. All right. In fact, I'm gonna like move it a little bit. All right. Right. So this is how you use the regular snipping tool. Once you have it up on screen, I'm trying to boil this down to like real essentials. You can do a lot more with it, but here's all you really need to do is go into the new button or click into it. Your screen will gray out like this, and then your mouse pointer changes to a crosshairs. Find what you want to capture, and I'm going to try to capture most of my file management window here, or a good part of it. And then I'm just going to highlight, drag, and then release. And there's my screenshot. Right? All right. Now, some people will go ahead and hit the save button and give it a file name. I'm going to show you how functionally you really don't even need to do that. If you want to save them all, go for it. Another handy tip, and this is like way in advance of any of the content that we're doing, this is a way that a lot of people steal web content, right? Don't want to create that image or that look, you just go in there, screenshot it, you got it, right? Not cool, by the way, but people do it all the time, right? So, all right. I'm now going to go to Microsoft Word, and you might have Word installed on your machine. If you don't, you can use the web-based version, or you can use Google Docs. So I will show that at the same time. So I'm kind of running both at the same time. So I went to my email, and then I'm going to find the Docs icon right there. So I'm going to launch a document here. So blank document in Google Docs. I have a blank document in Microsoft Word. Back in the snipping tool, now that the image is captured, I don't need to save it. Remember I said that? You can actually come up here to the toolbar and just choose copy. Hit the copy button, go over to Word, paste, there it is, right? Or go over to Google Docs, wherever that is, and paste it there. It works on both, right? Now you're gonna say, this is really kind of a dumb way to turn this in. Right? Yeah, right, and I thought this at first too. Then I'm like, well, you know, not really, right? Because I'm getting a snapshot of you, like what you created on your machine. I see that you did the work. Everybody's image will look different because everybody's color scheme, folder structure, naming convention will be a little bit different. This just shows me that you did it and that you have some sort of a plan in place for managing your files. That's really all it is. I'm not asking you to, you know, really type anything here, but, you know, type A personalities would probably do something like this. And what I mean is like homework, you know, week 1, file management or whatever, right? And here is my folder structure. So, I mean, if you want to type in some words to tell me what's on the screen, that's great. I kind of know what this one is, so you don't really need to, right? When you get into regular programming classes here at Gateway, so like if you take Python or Java with me, I will ask you for all of your assignments to screenshot your code because it's easier than me opening the code and running it, you know? So that's kind of the why. And why a Word document? Well, here's the secondary answer to that. When you put it in Blackboard, a Word document or a PDF, there's a couple other file formats, but those are the main two, will automatically render inside the grading environment. So I don't have to download it, open it, yada, yada. I just click your posting for your assignment and it just shows up. I look at it, I give you your points, right? So that's the why. Now, if you're in Microsoft Word, right, once you've captured the image, you're gonna go up here and do a save as, right? And then you'll find the folder that you created to put it in. So let's say it's my GTC Web Programming Unit 1, and then I might give it a name like File Management. And you can type in Unit 1, type your name, whatever. I really don't care. Some teachers will be very picky about name your file like this, right? And they even dock you points if you don't. I don't care. I'll be real frank, because it's attached to you in Blackboard. I know who it came from. So if you see my logic, you name it how it works for you, right? So then you just hit save. Now, if you're using Google Docs, though, when you're creating a document here, in order to convert it into a Word document, you have to come up to the File menu up here, right? And then right here it says Download. It's not what you would think. You'd think Save As, right? But here's a trick. Google Docs is constantly auto-saving. You never lose your work, right? Microsoft Word does too, but it's not constantly doing it. The web-based version does. The installed version does it auto, like every 5 minutes or something, or major revision. So you can't always trust it. But here you go to download, and then you'll download it as a Microsoft Word document. I didn't title it, but whatever, there it is. Then to turn it in, right? So if you guys are new to all this, which you might be, so I gotta keep that in mind. I go find the assignment listing, here it is. Look, I even made a nice little example here of what your screenshot might look like. And here's how you do an assignment. You read it and go, okay, first of all, I know it's an assignment because I always put these like yellow, red flags on them. And then I usually in bold and green tell you what the main topic is for the assignment. And this one is create a useful folder structure for your schoolwork, right? And then read the rest of it. Read the bullet by bullet, and it's the bullets that I want you to hit to get your points. Create a folder structure where you're going to be saving your work. This may be your documents folder, flash drive, Google Drive, etc. Whatever. Don't use flash drives, by the way. That should be removed from there. Create one folder for each course you're taking. Yeah, so I got to update some of that terminology. But you should at least have a web programming is what that should say. In each of those folders, create a nested folder structure and add a new folder for each unit up to unit 15, if that's what it is. And then it should look something like the thing below. Use the snipping tool to take a screenshot of your folder structure and attach the screenshot image to this assignment and submit. And I really probably should revise some of that. You're submitting the Word document is really a better way to say it. So to actually do the submitting, you want to come in and click on the assignment title. You'll notice that whenever I have my assignment titles, you know how I put that, I go U1. The reason I do that is because in the grade book, I know what unit it's in, right? Yes, Antoine.
So for this guys want us to at least do what 9?
Yeah, for web, yeah, we have 9 units. So that would be smart to do 9 folders in there. Now you might decide to change your mind on the structure later, and that's okay. I just want to see that you know how to do it and how to create folders.
I did it because there's one.
Yeah, I mean, you see, I didn't go and make 9 of them. That's too much work right now. But you make a few, so I know that you get it. That's really kind of the point. All right, so to turn it in, we go to the title of the assignment, and what I usually do for my assignment titles is, and this is where I differ from other instructors, so you guys should know this, is when I set this up, I don't like the system icons, you know? So they have these like goofy little icons they put next to everything. So that's information, whatever. And then the only way you know it's an assignment is it's like the same icon, but it's a little different. That doesn't say anything to me, so that's why I turned them off. So this is me being a silly web person who's very visual. I use my own icons, you know, so a video icon for videos, an assignment icon for assignments. And then I also change the link to like more of a link color so you know it's a link, right? So you want to click that link title, and then you get into the assignment submitting interface. I'm going to zoom out just a tad. So when you get in here, you'll see a repeat of all the instructions. There's the official due date, right? Right, so you got till next week's Wednesday at midnight. That's a ton of time, right? You should have I mean, this should be done today, right? Before you get out of here, right? And it's worth 1 point. And then normally what you do is you'll come in here, and when you have a file to submit, you use this big dotted box here to do it, right? So normally you can click Browse Local Files. It brings up your file interface. You can go to Documents, you know, GTC, Web Programming, Unit 1. There it is. Click Open, and it will attach. That's one way, right? Now, I know it seems silly because most of you guys seem like you're pretty in tune to this, but I have come into these classes where people have never touched a computer, right? And there might be somebody watching this video who's online that's the same way, right? So we can't take it for granted, right? When I first started teaching computers, half the class wouldn't know how to do it, right? Now we have people that can operate a phone like crazy and think they're computer experts. That's also not true, but but you usually know how to manage your files, right? So that's kind of a normal thing. Here's my favorite way to attach a file, by the way, is I'll just bring the file up in the File Explorer or the Finder, and you can just click, drag and drop and pull it into the box and see how it turns purple. You let go when it's purple and it's attached. That's the cool way. If you put your stuff on your Google Drive, now this is something you might want to do as well. We'll talk about that later, mostly, is you can actually access your Google Drive right from here. Or if you use Dropbox or OneDrive or SugarSync or Box or there's many tools like that, right? All of them are accessible through that interface. So that's one way you can do it. Now, I did want to very quickly show that there's this other tool called Snip and Sketch, right? That's part of Windows. And I think if you have Windows 11, this is what comes up automatically now instead of snipping tool. It works very much the same way. You just hit the new button, right? There's a little bit different look, but basically you're doing the same thing. It screenshots it, it's in the product. You can still hit the copy button. Here, though, you can do a few more edits than you can in the snipping tool, but it works essentially the same way. Either tool is fine. On the Mac, depending on which OS you're using, they have a tool called Grab in the older versions of OS X, and in the newer versions, I don't even know, I think they just call it Screenshot now. And they want you to do like keystroke commands, but I always forget what they are. So I always do like Command space, Screenshot, and it just comes up. Right. Works very much the same way. There are third-party tools you can use as well. Snagit is always one of the more popular ones. If you guys have never heard of it, I think it's free for students, but that one not only captures images of your screen, but also can capture video, which is kind of cool, by the way. And then finally, when it comes to file management, I do kind of want to do a little bit of a talk about this thought that storing files on your local machine only is not a smart idea, right? So you see, I'm pulling up my Google Drive. Now, all of us, because we have Gmail accounts here at Gateway, we have access to the full Google App Suite. We have docs and spreadsheets and slideshows and YouTube and all that stuff. But the Drive tool is really useful because I don't know how much storage you guys get. I think it's probably like 15 or 30 gig, or it's a handsome amount. Yeah. Now, your school account though, like especially if you're an employee, you see I'm at like 68 gigs of Google Drive storage personally, right? Yeah, I'm a little bit of a space hog, but that's me, right? Lots of files. But what I do is I run a piece of software that allows me to use my Google Drive natively on my machine, and it's called Google Drive File Stream. And let me show you what it does. Once you install the software, it brings up an icon. One of these icons here is it. I'm not even seeing. Oh, there it is. It's the last one. It's too obvious. Google Drive. And so once again, this is called Google Drive File Stream. And you can Google that, so Google Drive File Stream, and you see how it came up like that. And then it has, basically instructions on how to do it either for the Mac or the PC. On the PC, what it does is once you install the software and you go to your file manager, it creates a G drive for Google, right? And everything that's in my Google Drive in the cloud also pops up in my file manager here. So all the same files, all the same folders. Here's the catch though. None of these are actually on my computer. You pull the cord from the internet or the Wi-Fi goes off, I can't get to this stuff. There is a mode where you can switch it and the file is also on your computer, but then you're chewing up your hard drive space. The beauty of this is I can work with any file as I normally do, just save it to a folder and it's out in the cloud on Google. I really like this a lot because here's what happens. In the old days when everybody would come in here with like their keychain and their flash drive and they'd plug into the computer, and they'd work the whole class, do all their stuff. That was a great session. And they walk out and the flash drive is still there and they're 30 miles down the road, And then what happens, right? You're SOL. When I was at the Art Institute teaching, and this was a while back, but they used to give all the students there like these really fancy external hard drives. So like you do these big projects and you put them on your drive and you just carry it around for class and plug into the Mac and do your stuff. And then one person one day, just about to graduate, had their whole academic thing on their drive, just got up to go to the bathroom and came back and their drive was gone. And all their schoolwork, no backup. Don't let that be you. The problem is when we're working on our own computers, we kind of have this comfort that, what's on my computer, I can get it, right? But what if, I'm just giving you a what if, you're walking out to the car, you drop it on the pavement, car comes by, runs it over, lightning strikes, throw in all the scenarios, somebody poured soda on it, and there goes your stuff. If you put the stuff in the cloud, you're not going to lose it. Right? So I highly recommend that approach, even if you do it manually after the fact. Now, what a lot of people don't know about Windows since I think the second or third major update to Windows 10, they added OneDrive automatically to consumer accounts in Windows. So if you store your stuff in your documents folder on your Windows machine, most likely it's already on OneDrive in the cloud. Now, that's kind of automatic, and there is a limited amount of space, and Microsoft tries to get more money out of you. Apple does the same thing, by the way. Now, I have that feature turned off because I don't want everything on my computer to go to the cloud to Microsoft. That's a big story as to why. But the one reason, for example, is like I do like my income taxes. I don't want that stuff going into the cloud. Sorry, it's not going there. That's way too sensitive in my mind, right? But I do run multiple cloud services. So I run Google Drive File Stream for school, right? I don't do it for my personal, just for school. I have my Dropbox, so you can see that here in my sidebar. That's a private account. Dropbox is really, I think, the best of all these types of pieces of software, by the way. That one costs money. They only give you 2 gigs for free, but it's excellent, excellent product. OneDrive, my personal one, where I voluntarily put stuff into it. And then I also, because I have an Adobe Creative Cloud Suite, Antoine, right? So we were talking about that. They also give me 20 gigs of storage. So I have like 4 cloud storage services, and actually I have a couple others that are connected, but I have 4 of them that are running on this machine right now. Most of these OneDrive, Dropbox, and Creative Cloud keep a local copy on your machine so you can still work with the file even if you're disconnected from the internet, and then only uploads it to the cloud when you're connected. Google Drive file stream only works in the cloud unless you trigger the file to be also on your machine. So just so you understand the distinction, right? But the cloud storage, hey, you get free storage here at school, use it. You get it both from Microsoft and from Google. Google's probably the preferred storage mechanism here at Gateway though. So that's my little bit on file management. Any questions on any of that? You guys are cool? All right. We are going to take a break in a little bit, but I do want to kind of step forward and I want to do something that's kind of interesting here. And I'm going to play video, right? So this is going to be kind of weird, frankly, because I don't have the projection system. So it's going to come on your screens. I'm going to try to crank up my speakers here so you can hear it, but it's still like really bad audio. But I always like to play this video, especially for web classes or anybody who's doing kind of like an intro level IT and programming, because it shows you how far we come, but also shows you how important it is to have vision for the future. And because you guys are all the people that are getting trained right now, you guys have to have vision now. Us old people already did our thing, right? So now it's on you. We're passing the baton. Yeah, right. But okay, so a little preface on this video. The audio quality is terrible. It was recorded on videotape in 1969, right? And that's back when videotapes were on reels and not cassettes, you know? It was a show on TV, and how it is playing right now, and I didn't want it to play. The audio is horrible, right? But what they were doing, and I want to give you historical perspective, in 1969, what was the major world history event that happened in 1969? Moon landing is, right? It's like, man sets foot on the moon, most important thing in history. All right. Other thing that happened at almost exactly the same time, a couple weeks apart, the launch of the internet. Now, think about this. So you guys are all web people. Which is really more important? Could we have lived without the moon landing? Probably. I mean, we did get a lot of advancements, right? And then there's people that don't even believe it happened, right? Right. So, right. But, you know, I do believe it happened, and a lot of technology was developed because of it, a lot of programming and whatever. But in terms of importance for world history, is the internet really more important? And I'm going to argue significantly. When the printing press first came out back, you know, in the, what's like 15, God, I don't even remember the year. Maybe it was the early 1600s, maybe it was. And we called it the Gutenberg Press. And why it was a revolution is prior to that point, if you wanted to have a book, let's say you got a book and you want your friend to have a copy, you got to sit down with an ink pen and copy it all by hand. Then they came out with the printing press where they could type into a machine, ink it, put a piece of paper on there, pull a lever, there's a copy, there's a copy, there's a copy. And all of a sudden, you know, this is why this is important. You would go to church on Sunday and somebody would tell you, the good book says, well, now you can get a printed copy and look at it yourself and say, no, it doesn't say that at all, right? You know what I'm saying? So really, really important, because all of a sudden, information which was once held tight no longer could be.
That's the fact that you said that is interesting, and I just want to throw this out there because it's kind of related. The fact that that's the situation with a lot of the slaves, that they couldn't read, so they didn't know what the Bible or the book said. They could only go by. We
just passed the law, and it says you're free, but not really.
Yeah, and then
you know,
when you start reading, they was able to see certain stuff and interpret it different ways. But to your point,
Antoine, that's a really poignant point, because this is really what the power of the internet brings us. Because before we had the printing press, where people, I mean, they had no reason to learn how to read because they didn't have any books to read, right? So the only people that got educated to read were like royalty, clergy, maybe businessmen, maybe, right, if they had money. Then the printing press came out, and then everybody had to learn how to read and write. because that's how you learn, right? And now that we have the internet, it used to be that information that was hard to find. I mean, when I had to do research in college, I had to go to the library, find the book, look it up, and go, oh, no, this is no good, which I could have done on Google in like 5 seconds, right? So now we have all the information available to us. And because of the way the internet operates, which is free and open, nobody can filter that information from us, folks. This is important, right? But with the freedom of information also comes a different kind of responsibility, because now you're also presented with a lot of information that's completely useless. In fact, most of it is useless. How do you figure out what's good? Right? So these are some really deep questions. So really, right? We, in 1969, the internet, probably when this video was made, was just still an idea. And the internet in 1969 was connecting one college to another, and then connecting to some military and whatever, and corporation. So it wasn't really like the internet we know now. It wasn't until really the early 80s that the internet started to open up to the world. But as is really important in technology, before you can have something, you have to imagine it first and what it will bring. So they didn't know back then. They knew computers would do something. They knew we would eventually get them connected, but what would that mean to the typical daily life of a human? And I want you to watch this video. So without having the knowledge of how we live today, they did this video. I'm going to try to crank the volume as loud as I can. No closed captioning on this because the audio is that kind of bad. So I'm going to try to turn up the volume here as much as I can. So here goes. Check it out. Watch for all the stuff. And hopefully it translates well on your Zoom screens there.
Fingertip shopping will be one of the many homemakers' conveniences. This video console will be channeled into the store of their choice. There, a camera will scan a display of wares, which she will select by push button. Another part of this console is a household monitor screen, which maintains a watch on critical areas in the house, swimming pool, or yard. What the wife selects on her console will be paid for by the husband at his counterpart console. All bills and transactions will be carried out electronically. A central bank computer will debit the family's account the amount of purchases and credit the department store, for example, informing the family's home computer at the same time. Father, at the touch of a button, receives an instantaneous printed copy of his budget, the amount of taxes he owes, the payments left on the car, and so forth. All documents and household records are available on the video screen for immediate reference. Also at his disposal is an electronic correspondence machine, or home post office, which allows for instant written communication between individuals anywhere in the world. To maintain these and hundreds of complex electronic circuits, a monitor checks all circuits every few seconds, inserts a backup circuit if and when trouble develops, and alerts the communal service agency for replacement.
I don't know who that communal service agency is, but it sounds pretty big brothery to me, right? And, okay, but this is fascinating. So in a world with no internet, they're envisioning all the stuff we do, right? They're shopping, they're paying bills, they're keeping track of the kids in the other room. Okay, they have, their email, they have to do it with a pen. But you know what, if you have an iPad, and I have like one of those iPads with the smart pencils, you totally can do that. They didn't really kind of envision the keyboard and the mouse, but they had flat screens and more than one screen. They were, I mean, that's like so spot on. It's kind of scary, right? It kind of makes you think. So I want you to really think about this really carefully, because what happens in human society is that other instructors walk in and they have a one-liner of the day. This is Jerry, folks.
Hi. Lance is not that popular of a name nowadays, but in medieval times, they used lance a lot.
All right, so bad humor. Yeah. Well, we were talking about German airplanes earlier, and that was a little more colorful. Okay, so I'm trying to remember what point I was trying to make is we have this propensity as a culture, especially with the advent of this like field of fiction called science fiction, where we think about all these really crazy thoughts, and then we make it happen. So I'll give you an example. You watch like the old Star Trek series, right? And they had communicators. So this is the real old Star Trek with Kirk. And how would he call the ship? He had like a flip phone. Kirk to Enterprise, right? Beam me up. And then the next generation came out and they had touch screens before touch screens were a thing. And then all of a sudden, all their stuff is touch screen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, some of the really interesting thing is this forecasting that we make just with our imagination is enough to actuate something in reality. We figure out a way to get there just because we imagined it. Now, what I always tell people is be careful what you imagine. Imagine something good. Think about all the sci-fi that we watch, you know. I want to think about it's like zombie apocalypse, pandemics, you know, alien invasions, right? Those aren't really such good things to imagine. What I always liked about the Star Trek thing is I was positive. They always looked at equality and rights and positive things that they were trying to do. So I'm not going to play it here in class, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drop another link into the chat, and I'm going to ask if you guys have the time to watch this video. So here it comes in the chat, and you can maybe email it to yourself or something. But this is a video that was developed by Corningware Corporation. That is a very similar video to the one that we just saw that was done about 8-9 years ago already now, that did the same thing. It was making a vision of the future that's about to come. And how real do we think it's going to be? And here's the astounding thing. Most of the technology that they have in there is already possible, just in 10 years of doing it. But watch that video. It's called A Day Made of Glass. And the killer technology for them, aside from being the internet, was that they're going to have what we call smart glass in the future, where it's transparent, but it's fully electronic, and it can display, project, touch, and all that stuff. We'll have like clear phones, clear screens, glass will be everywhere, and it'll all be computerized and all interconnected, right? So kind of an interesting video to watch. So highly recommended, by the way, A Day Made of Glass. All right, let's do a 5-minute break, folks. We'll come back and we'll dig into some more stuff. The video is being paused. All right, we're gonna dig into the PowerPoint for this unit for chapter 1. And I just, what I was just telling the class here in person before I unpaused is that all the PowerPoints are attached to the topics for each unit that you can download and look at. You can take notes on them, have your own copy of it. I still want you to read the chapters though, if you possibly can. Yes, it mimics all the content in the book. The book still does have a little bit more in-depth content than what's in these PowerPoints. All right, learning outcomes for this chapter. This is the stuff that the book thinks that you should know and learn. So I'll just let you read that really quick. And a lot of it really kind of talks about, you know, what the heck is the World Wide Web and what is the internet? The World Wide Web, by the way, is not the internet. The World Wide Web operates on top of the internet. Right? So the World Wide Web, you know, the web as we call it, is really it's a combination of a protocol and a transmission format. And what a protocol really means ultimately is a set of rules for moving information. When we go to a web browser and we type in a web address, we don't usually do it anymore, but in the old days, maybe you did, you would type in HTTP or HTTPS, right? Which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and the S is for secure. Right? So you never want to put your credit card on a site that doesn't have an S on it, and the lock's not there. But the internet really is a network that connects all the other networks that want to be on it. So when you're at home and you have your AT&T or your Spectrum or whoever your provider is, your router, you have a network inside your house with Wi-Fi and whatever, and then that connects out to the internet and allows you to connect to anybody else that's on the internet. Antoine?
Yeah, I just want to make a note that the internet and the World Wide Web is
Right. The World Wide Web operates on top of the internet. You can kind of like, if you want to use an analogy, the internet's kind of like a super highway, and the World Wide Web is the vehicle that travels it. Right. You know, and maybe most of the traffic on the internet is the World Wide Web, but that's not entirely true.
Yeah.
You know?
I know it's used interchangeably, but
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll get online, right? Right, and really, when we're talking about getting online, we're really, for the most part, we're going to a web browser and sending information or receiving information through it, right? But that aspect of the internet's called the World Wide Web. What we're going to learn a little bit later is when we start like transferring files and stuff. Oh, wow, there's a thing called file transfer protocol that's just for uploading and downloading files, and then we have this thing called email, which is for sending messages. That's a protocol. And in fact, there's hundreds of protocols, and they all run over the internet, and they all use different port addresses on the internet. So we'll talk about that. But the internet, in short, is really a network of networks. It's a global network, and pretty interesting that, you know, in this modern age that we live in, like when the war in Ukraine started, if you guys want like some historical underpinnings before they started like shooting at each other, there was a whole war going on online, right? And cybersecurity people would know that. Hacking attacks from both sides, people using the technology to like feed true information, false information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all about information, right? And that's kind of like the new way of warfare these days, interestingly. So why did the internet, which had been around really since '69 and formed publicly maybe since the early '80s, why did it take off during the 1990s? And there was a number of different reasons. Well, yeah, Al Gore is not the answer, not at all. No, he didn't invent anything. All he invented was the name Information Superhighway. That was his contribution. It really is the person that you see on this slide that was really responsible for the explosion. And it's a man by the name of Tim Berners-Lee, who is this academic from Great Britain, who worked on a lot of really advanced scientific projects at a place called CERN. You guys ever heard of CERN? That's where they have that big Hadron Collider thing, where they're trying to like make black holes in this giant ring and whatever, you know, so high-end scientific work. This is in Switzerland. And he was part of the scientific community there, and they were all using advanced computer systems to do stuff, and none of the systems could talk to each other. And if you wanted in the old days to get to anything on the internet, you had to know the IP address or the server name and have a login, know the right protocol, have the right software, all this like stuff. It was not easy to connect to things. It was all there, but we didn't have a browser. We just let, you know, Google it and go, right? It was not like that. So what he did is he invented the first web browser that was text-based. So it looked, you know, like this kind of thing, like a green screen. And you would type a command and a thing would come up on the screen, and then you would use your arrow keys to move between the links, and you found the link that you wanted and you'd press enter. And the browser was called Lynx, Lynx. And I think most distributions of Linux and Unix still have that browser in there somewhere. But really all that piece of software did is it allowed us to symbolically connect to anything on the internet by using a link. I didn't all of a sudden need to know what the numerical IP address is or what the name of the website was anymore. There's the link, I'm clicking it and I'm going, right? So the power was that on one web page, he could have links to like 20 different sites, all from different, you know, places, and get to the stuff he needed without having to remember anything, right? So he was the brainchild that invented the concept of web surfing. Now, there were no search engines really back then. There were other technologies that also competed with the World Wide Web. One was called Gopher. This is really bizarre, but there were Gopher servers, and the University of Minnesota invented that one. And it was very similar. It was link-based, but it wasn't quite as easy as the World Wide Web, which is why the World Wide Web took off. We had search engines that were really more not search engines, but catalogs of websites. The two big ones were Veronica and Archie, you know? So in the old days of the web, like when I first learned, it was all command line, Veronica, Archie, and Gopher. And then the web came out, we're like, wow, this is kind of cool. And then what happened is we got to the point where, these technologies that they were using, there was a revolution happening in computing, just like there was on the internet. In the old days of computing, like when I first started my first IT position and I was a support guy, our standard installation on campus, this is at Cardinal Stritch in Milwaukee, was I think DOS 5.0 or DOS 3 point something. It was one of those two. WordPerfect 5.1 and Lotus 1.2.3. And all the screens were green screens like this, like what you see on the screen, and everything was done. You type and press enter, or you know menu shortcuts or whatever. Pretty primitive, right? Really primitive. If you were lucky, you were connected to a printer, that kind of thing. You weren't connecting to the outside world. You might connect to an internal database, but that's about it. Then our operating systems started becoming graphical. The Mac started first back in '84. This usually blows people's minds, but they had 32-bit OS with a graphical user interface in 1984, folks. It took Windows a decade to catch up. A decade, right? So whenever anybody pulls out the Windows versus Mac, argument, I'm like, we're just following what Mac already did, right? Yeah. So now, why did it take off when it did? The internet exploded right around the year 1995. Why? What happened in 1995 in computing history? Not AOL. Well, no, actually it was called Windows 95. And here's what was important about Windows 95. Windows 95 had built into it a web browser called Internet Explorer, so you didn't have to download one separately. And it had the connection tools built into the operating system. You just had to type in the right phone numbers and settings, and then you were online, right? And then, of course, most people back then, they would get like their AOL disk or CompuServe or Prodigy or whatever it was, which were really bulletin board services that were canned. They weren't really internet, right? To get real internet, you still had to go to a provider, usually a local ISP. In Milwaukee and southeastern Wisconsin, the big one was called Exec PC, which was in Berlin. They still exist somehow, but they got bought out a million times. But with a company like that, you could set up your SLIP or PPP connection, load up a web browser. Usually you would prefer Netscape back then. And then you were truly on the internet. And then once you're on the internet, it's just wherever you take yourself, right? Where AOL and other services had you canned into an environment and gave you the content. It's not the internet, right? Not the internet we know today. So a lot of stuff kind of transpired to make that happen, but it was that graphical web browser that first came out that really kind of blew the doors off. The text browser was cool, but here I am in a graphical operating system. It'd be nice if the browser would work in a window and I could click a mouse on it and there'd be pictures. That's what the guys who created the Mosaic Browser, and I'm trying to find where that is here in the slideshow, but I can just talk about it. So this happened, I don't know the exact year, probably around 90, 91. You guys can Google the exact year, it's in your book. But a couple of students studying at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, which is the Center for National Supercomputing or something like that. It's like a federal thing. Decided to take the idea that Tim Berners-Lee had and write fresh code to put it into a windowed environment and allow the use of a mouse and graphics. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, is this cool, right? Because if you could do it with a green screen and go anywhere in the world, now you're seeing it like in a regular window while you're coding a Word document. I mean, it's like, wow, man, the internet is active. So most regular consumers didn't start getting online until the mid 90s. And the reality is most people really didn't get online until about the year 2000, right? Now, a lot of you guys may not have even been born at that point, but now within another 10 years, this happened. When did the first smartphone come out? Well, we had devices kind of like this before, but around 2007, 2008, the iPhone came out. Sorry, Mac came first again, right? And I mean, we are now, what, 15 years or less later, and it's almost 100% adoption. Who walks around without a smartphone? I mean, that's amazing. And we all have internet. And the power we have in our hands is more powerful than big supercomputers from like 30 or 40 years ago. Right? More power here than what landed man on the moon. And what do we do with it? Netflix, Angry Birds, or whatever, yeah, TikTok, whatever it is your thing is, there it is, and it's in the palm of your hand. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to learn in here, and like I said, I'm going to kind of rifle through some of this. We have some standards bodies that do. That's not me projecting that, by the way. That's the tech in the other room projecting that. We have a lot of standards bodies that oversee the internet. One of them is really important that we'll talk about soon. The one that kind of runs the internet is called Icann. So this is the one I just pulled up. This runs out of, used to be run out of the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. And that's where they still have their main offices. So that's like one of the birthplaces of the internet in terms of the World Wide Web. What Icann does is they control all the IP addresses and all the domain names. It used to be a US controlled entity up until like 5 years ago when they released it to the international community, because everybody's like, it's not fair that you guys control it. They're like, yeah, you're probably right, but we still mostly control it, and it's still housed here. Their servers, which control the domain names, are located at 13 main locations replicated planet-wide. So just in case one goes down, we still know how to get places on the internet. Without Icann in the domain name system, what happens is the only way to get to something is to know the numeric IP address. And who's remembering that? You probably don't even know your own, right? So shows the growth of the internet here on this slide. And of course it caps at 2019, but you can only imagine that it's grown significantly since then. And this is the global population and the percentage that use the internet. When you consider we have a lot of countries where don't even have electricity in most places, barely have phones. Here's what the revolution is, though, because this is what happened in my I'll call it like my heritage home country of Greece, right? In Greece, the way Greece operates, they have like 4 or 5 big cities. A lot of people live there, and it's kind of like, I think of it kind of Milwaukee is the same way. A lot of people live in Milwaukee, but everybody's got a place up north. And in Greece, everybody like lives and works in the city, but they have their home village. And then when they have a holiday or family things, they go back to the village. And you go up into the village where there's barely any roads. Heck, they didn't even have electricity till like the 80s, I think, in my parents' home village. And then they had one telephone for the whole village. And if you wanted to use it, you go to and everybody would listen in. And then cell phones happened, and they put up a tower on the mountain, and everybody had internet, just like that. So this is what's happening in the third world. In places like where we live, where they wired everything well in advance, we have amazing internet everywhere, all types, right? But in growing nations, in third world countries that are coming into the information age, that's why it's exploding. One tower, everybody gets a phone, everybody's online. Most of the world is online on their phone. Primary device. I don't know what these actual numbers are now, but it's pretty high. Different types of internet technology, right? So like we talk about the internet, which is a connection of a network of networks, but then we also hear these words thrown around. Like here at Gateway, if you're an employee, we have an intranet, so instructors use this, where we have resources that students can't see, but employees can, right? It's an internet that's internal to an organization. You don't have to be on site to use it. You can be anywhere, but there's basically a login wall. A really good example, Blackboard is kind of an intranet. Like you can go to the Blackboard website and look, but you can't do anything unless you have a login and you're signed into a class. And then you see all the stuff that's inside. And this is what's fascinating about the web, you guys. with the web, when we go on Google and we do a search, we're searching what they call the surface web. That's maybe 3, 4, 5% of the total content of the internet. Most of the content, the deep web, is usually behind the login. Blackboard's a great example. You can see the login screen, but until you log in, you don't get to see the stuff. Facebook, another example, right? You have to have an account, you have to get on the system, and then you got the whole world, right? So, all right. Here's a really important entity here, the W3C, World Wide Web Consortium. And this is a body that's been meeting since kind of the Tim Berners-Lee days, that gets together and sets all the rules for all the web languages and transmission protocols. Okay, so this is why this is really important to us as web developers, you know, because we have to code web pages according to rules, you know, so they look right and they work right. But they also have this website called W3 Schools. And you see, I just typed it in like that. W3 is all I typed. And W3 stands for World Wide Web. And this website is run by this organization that sets the standards for the web. So if you're looking for information about code for the web, this is the site, period, right? Why? Because they set the standards, so they know the rules, so their information is awesome. So this will be one of these references that you will use going on into the future in your career, because here's what's going to happen. I'm going to teach you guys a bunch of tags. I'm going to teach you guys like CSS tricks, phrasing for putting your code together, and then in a week you're going to forget it. And you go, how am I ever going to remember this stuff? And here's the answer. Don't bother. Why would you? Okay, well, you will remember some stuff, right? So I like have like this inane ability to remember lots of useless facts, you know, numbers and whatever, you know, that's just me. But here you come, and I just want you to look at the tutorials that they have here, right? HTML, and then look at all these other languages. It's not just one language, right? But HTML is the big one. So you come in here, and they go through, and they have all these things. So all this stuff in here, we're not going to cover all of it in this class, but a lot of it in this class. And so just for example, like when we get to creating HTML links, let's say you had that lesson, it's a couple of weeks later, I forgot how to do a link. How does that work? Right? So you come in here, you look it up, and they show you, right? And they give you the form of the link, right? So this is the code you type. And then, you know what? They have these cool little tools built in, like this. We'll try it yourself. And this is really fun too, because I use it all the time to test stuff, is they have an in-browser editor that you can use, alter the code, run the code, and see the result right on your screen without, you know, so for example, if I want to change this to go Vikings, I mean, after yesterday, what are you going to say, you know? Go, hey, if Packers got to get it together, man, there's no excuse. I'm sorry, right? For all the Aaron Rodgers talk we get, I mean, he's got to, okay, go Packers. And then I hit the run button and you see how it updates on the other side, right? And then that creates a link and you can actually click the link and go to the website. Cool, right? So for all the stuff they teach you on here, this is the site, man, that all your tags, like if you don't remember the stuff and your rented book went back, this is where we go. Professionals included. How do I? Oh yeah, this is how, right?
This is also where you have us doing quizzes.
For our quizzes, we have no quizzes, only exams.
Exam.
Yeah, I think this is helpful for that too, if you want. But they cover a lot of different stuff here. They go pretty in depth, explain it all, give examples. And you know what? It's free, right? And then for other classes that you guys will take, you know, you guys will learn CSS, you'll learn JavaScript, you'll learn SQL, you'll learn Python, you'll learn PHP, you'll learn, you know, you're going to learn all this stuff as you go through this program, right? So this is kind of your ready reference. This is like the killer reference for all web developers, right? Bookmark that one. W3 schools. All right, so going back to the slideshow here real quick, a lot of issues that we have to face, and we'll talk about these as we go. Accessibility. Did you know that blind people surf the web? Deaf people surf the web? Your car surfs the web? You know, all sorts of stuff is getting online. So we have to build around that. All right. Talk a little bit about networking here, and I'm not trying to teach a networking class, but you should read this section. It talks about how things typically work. So like on your home network might look kind of like this, except you might not have a server. It floors me. I remember the first time we got internet at home and we had dial-up and whatever. We had the one computer in the house. And now here we are, I don't know, 20 some years later. And I mean, oh my God, I probably have like 20 devices on the network, and my kids probably do too. And there's game systems and TVs and Rokus and oh my God. Yes, Antoine.
Under U1W3 pretext.
Yes, I'm going to get to that.
Okay, that's what
Yeah, because you want to know how to do the homework, right?
Well, I had clicked on it and it took me to the W3 schools. That's why I'm like, okay.
Yeah. There's a reason for that. And thank you for actually triggering that in my mind to circle back. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff to read about here, like the fact that we work with local area networks. So that's the stuff usually inside of our building, but often we're connecting to external resources. Gateway, for example, with all our different campus locations, there's like 10, 11 buildings or something we have in different places. We have what we call a wide area network, which is a privatized network. So like if you're on the registration system at Elkhorn, it connects to Kenosha and vice versa. And, you know, and it's all internal, no other traffic can access it. And, you know, interestingly, the internet, you know, being a network of networks, but it's also public, you know, which is really kind of a weird thing. And so nobody can hypothetically control it, but it runs over private company equipment. So in some areas, AT&T controls it. In other areas, it's MCI or Sprint or whoever, right? And there's kind of this convergence of technology that's happened. Often, and what's really important for us as web people, is we work in what we call a client server kind of environment. So we have a web server where we're going to upload our pages, and our web browsers become the client. That's our portal to see what's on the server, right? So when we connect to something on the internet, we're really connecting to like a machine in a closet somewhere that has that web page or program, you know, and that's how it works. It's kind of a bizarre thing, but basically what the web client does is you put in an address, it goes out to the internet, finds it, pulls it back to your screen and renders it hopefully the way it was intended and does the things you need it to do. And this happens continuously. So there's information going back and forth. But for the most part, when we're surfing the internet, it's download only. We're downloading to our machine. The client, the main client that we use is our browser. For most people these days, I think Chrome is by far the most popular browser by number. And then can you guys name the other major browsers? We talked about some of them.
Yeah.
Edge, Firefox, Safari on the Apple platforms. There's the old Internet Explorer, the one that nobody knows about called Opera, right? You guys, right? And Opera actually has a really strong user base that's really consistent, and they came up with a lot of stuff before other browsers did, like tabs, view source, a couple of other interesting features. And then there's the newfangled browsers like Vivaldi. You guys never heard of it, right? Or Dolphin, or my favorite, Brave, which is a privacy browser. Really, really cool product, by the way. What's that? Yeah, DuckDuckGo. Well, yeah, they do have a browser now, don't they, right? Yeah, they're a search engine too, but they also have a browser. Yeah, so you can kind of, I think it's a Chrome-based browser too, isn't it, right? Yeah, Brave is kind of one of those too. We do run over a bunch of different kind of protocols, and we'll talk about that more next time. But basically, what a protocol is are rules for sending communication. You know, it's an agreed upon set of rules that we follow, so we all know that we're on the same page is really kind of the best way to say it. You know, it's like the English alphabet is a protocol in a sense, because we have an agreed upon set of letters. When you put them together, they're pronounced a certain way. You know, English probably makes the least sense that way, but still, there's rules, right, for communication. The one that we're going to focus on, and this is where I'm going to stop the slideshow for this week, we'll pick it up again next week, by the way, is with the file transfer protocol, which is the one that we use to upload our files to the web server, and a really important tool for web developers. I will tell you that here at Gateway, our philosophy is we get you into this immediately, because as a professional, it's a required skill, period, right? A lot of other forms of web instruction, and you guys will go out there and find out what I mean later on in life, perhaps, is you learn how to do all this web stuff. They never show you how to upload it. Like, how do I get this on the internet? Next class. You know, that's what they do to you. You never do it. And so when I started chairing the department here, I'm like, oh no, we're doing web servers here, you know, because it's essential, right? And so I have created for you guys accounts on our Prometheus server, and I'm going to show you how to access those. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to go, and I'm going to make sure it's visible. And of course it's not, so I got to turn it on. You guys can actually watch me do this. There's no grades in my grade book yet. So I have to actually just enable the column. All right. So if you go to My Grades on the left sidebar in Blackboard, it'll pull up your grade book. This is a pretty important place too. Yes, E. Oh, okay. I thought you were going, oh. But you'll notice here that I did put in an entry in the grade book that says Prometheus account username/password. So I just want to show you where it is. The accounts have already been created in advance. And if you get deep enough into the lecture material on your own, you can explore this. For sake of time, real frankly, I don't have time to do this today, but that's going to be the first thing that we do next time. Basically, how FTP works is like this. We will load up a piece of software. You'll take your server address, username, and password and enter it into the product. You'll connect up to the server, and then you'll get this dual interface like what you're looking at right now, where the left side of the interface are my local folders and files. The right side of the interface is my account on the Prometheus server. The stuff that I put into that folder is publicly visible on the internet from any browser, as long as you type in the right address. Eventually, if the content stays there long enough, Google does index it, right? So that happens too. Yeah, it is. And this is something we provide to you guys for free. And once you guys graduate, as long as the server is up, your stuff is there, right? So, and I don't think there's any functional limit to disk space, but you don't want to hog it. But there's not necessarily a limit, right? So we will dig into FTP next week, but that's where you find your username and password. What I will also point out is because some of this stuff is in transition, we transitioned from our old Apollo server to Prometheus. You will encounter lots of information in the course shell and in the videos that talks about Apollo. You can just substitute the word Prometheus for it and get to it. If you're curious as to what Prometheus looks like, I'll bring up the Prometheus homepage. Doesn't go anywhere, there's no links on it, but that's our, does anybody know where this comes from? Yeah, but one of the alien movies, basically. Right, so we just thought it was kind of cool. We always look for cool names for the servers, and Prometheus, in Greek mythology is the bringer of knowledge. So we thought, hey, this is kind of cool, he stole fire from the gods and gave it to the people, for better or worse. So that was kind of the inspiration, right? We're the Apollo web server, which is still operational. And actually, let's do it like this. There it is. That's the Apollo homepage. Why a sun? Because Apollo was the sun god. So we have a theme. The previous one was Kronos, and then we had Mercury. It's always like gods or mythological. Yeah, I have a little bit to do with that, right? As you might guess, right? Hey, you got to have fun with it, right? And IT people like to have fun. All right, I'm going to go back to the question that Antoine posed, and Antoine, thank you. It's kind of a way of keeping me on point, right? Is like, what do we need to do for next week? So I'm going to explain what you guys need to do for next week. The one thing we kind of did in class, and that was file management, right? I have a couple of activities in here, like here's some useful links about file management and how to do screenshots and whatever. That's up to you if you want to watch those, not required in any way, and you're not tested on that. The two other assignments that we have to get to are first the pre-tests from W3 schools and personal project planning. I'm going to talk about the project planning first, right? And so this is a long ways down the road, but you guys probably came to this class because you have an interest in making web pages. And for all I know, you might even have a mission already in mind for what you want to build, right? Here's your chance to get started. So what I want is for you to kind of brainstorm, if you would, at least a couple, 2-3 ideas of a kind of website you might want to build. Now, we're not going to be building something that's like Facebook, that's like interactive with liking and chatting and video calls, right? That's not happening in this class. Down the road, maybe, right? We're going to build what we call like static HTML pages that are what we call like brochure style websites. They're informational. We're getting images, videos, content, words on the screen and making it look good. That's our goal. Think of a possible project you might want to build. Maybe you're into gaming, or maybe, I always try to find a theme when I do examples. So usually in the fall, I do a football theme. I'm kind of tiring a little bit of that, because I've done it so many times. Or sometimes I pick like one of my favorite TV shows and I do that. Or I'm into playing guitar, so I might do something on guitar. Whatever trips your trigger, you should build a website about it, right? I think the final project page count's probably like 6-ish, something like that. That's about what we're shooting for. And I'll have certain requirements for it, right? But what I'm looking for right now, you're not building a web page. I just need, like, what are some ideas you have, right? And if you're, whatever it is, throw it out there. It doesn't have to be a really lengthy document. I just want to see what your ideas are. And then I'll kind of coach you based on those ideas. Like, this is a good idea, that probably won't work, that kind of thing. So that's an easy assignment to complete. That I think is not due till next Wednesday also. So if you don't complete it by next week, that's fine. You can still come back and ask questions. The pre-tests is a little bit more particular. And so here's my thinking on this. This will take you back to the W3 Schools website. And this is a weird way to start a class, but I'm going to have you go to their website and take a test to see how much you already know. Because some people do come in here like, hey man, I did some HTML in school, right? I did this thing online and I figured out some all by myself, right? Great. Or maybe you've never ever touched it ever. That's fine too, right? No judgment. But at the very least, I want you to take the HTML5 quiz and the CSS quiz. And I'm going to just demonstrate really quick how to do them, okay? So if I'll go to the HTML5 one. You see, the title's right there. It says there's 40 questions, right? Your grade, I will say this up front, your grade is not dependent on how well you do. It's either you do it or you don't. It doesn't matter what your score is. Here's my thinking, folks, is we go through this and we start the quiz, you're asked the question. So here's the first one. So you get a free one, right? What does HTML stand for? You have to read your book or look it up, right? So it stands for Hypertext Markup Language, all right? And then you go next, and you keep going, and at the end, you will get a score, and it'll say, you got a 73%, or you got a 40%, you need to study some more, or something like that. I want you to screenshot that result, put it in a Word document, and submit it. Do the same thing for the CSS quiz, and then what will happen on the last day of class, in class we'll do it, when we're all done, we'll run the tests again, and I want to see how much your score changed. Because you might get like a 30% now and then get like a 90% at the end, right? And just proof, you know, that I taught you something, hopefully, or you taught yourself something is really the truth of it, right? All right, so that's how that works, right? So do the HTML and the CSS. If you feel brave and want to try JavaScript, do that too. If that one's not required, because we really don't go heavy into that. But that same exact thing we'll do at the end of the course, and then we'll smile at how much we did and how much we learned. Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything in here. We got the file management. Okay, so the FTP upload, you'll notice on that one's not due until Friday of next week, right? So we're gonna cover that next time. If you're ambitious, there's enough videos there and information where you can guide yourself through it if you wanna try. Right? But next week, that's gonna be a big thing that we do. In fact, we're gonna start with FTP. And I'm going to give you guys a super quick little primer in the 1 minute that we have left on how it works. But this is basically what we're going to do. We're going to grab a text editor like this. This is Notepad++, by the way. So we're going to do software installs next week too. And I'm going to just go, hello world, right? Okay, hello world. I'm going to save this. And this is really bad. I'm going to save it on my desktop. So why? Because I can find it, right? I'm going to name it how I'm supposed to name it. You guys will learn all of this next time. And then I will use my FTP software to go to my desktop, find that file, move it over to the web server. So I just did a drag and drop. And then what you'll learn how to do is you'll go to your Prometheus account and load up the page. So this is really lame, you know, because it says hello world and it's not really a web page. But I just created a file, uploaded it to the server on the other side of town, went to my web browser and pulled it back. And then the way that you guys will turn in all your homework for this class, when you ever do a web page assignment, you'll do all your work, upload it all, make sure it works. You'll come up here, you'll copy the URL, paste it into Blackboard, and that's how you turn in your homework, right? So you're gonna turn in your homework by actually creating a web page and putting it on the server. And the whole idea is you get a lot of practice with it. So when you get to your other classes that do the same thing, most of the web classes do this, you'll already know how to do it and you'll be ready to go. And if you happen to land a job somewhere where they need some web skills, you already have the skill. All right, folks, that ends class here. We'll see you all next week.